Okay, so we're going to look at relevant word problems, and here is our first problem. You're planning your graduation party, but you are also on a budget. You have the food covered, but you only have $50 to spend on paper plates and utensil sets. If you're serving hamburgers, hot dogs, along with potato chips, potato salad, and a side salad, how many guests can you serve if each utensil set costs $1.99 and paper plates are 99 cents? Okay, so I'm going to set this back here a little bit so we can look at solving this. And when I look at word problems, especially ones like this that have, a fair amount of information in them, but not all of it is relevant, I really want to look at how I would decode this problem. So, first of all, does it really matter that this is a graduation party? Well, no, not really, not in the sense of solving this problem. One thing does matter though. We have $50 to spend. And we also know that we know the menu, but that again doesn't really matter. So what really matters to us is this phrase right here. How many guests can you serve? And I'm going to put a box around that. And the reason I do that is especially for problems that have a lot of steps or have a not a necessarily direct path to solving them, to getting the answer. I do that so it reminds me to come back. Once I have a solution, I come back to this to see if my solution answers this problem. So that's why I do that. And then the other pieces of information are that the utensil sets cost 99 cents and paper plates are 99 cents. Utensils are $1.99. Okay, so again, a lot of our students might have difficulty trying to figure out just exactly where to start in solving this problem. And I'm a big believer in, what's the worst that could happen? You make a mistake. Okay, you learn from that. You learn that somewhere along the line in that solution you chose, that solution path, you made a mistake. So you're not going to make that same mistake again. So hey, you've learned. I think a mistake is only a mistake if we don't learn from it. Otherwise, we call it experience, right? Okay, so I'm gonna use the guess and check method here, and I'm gonna use some numbers that are nice or that are easy to work with. So I'm just gonna start with 10. Let's say we're gonna have 10 people. So 10 utensil sets cost $1.99 a piece. So that must mean that if we have 10 of them, they are $19.90 a piece, right? And likewise, if we have 10p for plates, they're going to be $9.90. So what I'm doing is just moving my decimal point one place to the right because I'm multiplying by 10. And that's the result I get. So if we add these two amounts together, the 1990 and the 990, we're going to end up with 29.80. Okay, so that is a little over half of my $50. So that tells me that I can't really just double this. So 20 people would be too many because I would be closer to $60. And so if my budget is firm at $50, I can't have 20 people come. So the next thing that I would do is to cut this all in half. So cut my numbers in half. So I'm going to go with 5 more utensil sets, and that's going to equal, if I just look at my $19 as a whole number and I'm dividing that by 2 mentally, I know that 9 plus 9 is 18, and I have $1 more than that, so I'm going to split that in half. So half of $19 is going to be $9.50. And likewise with the 90 cents, half of 90 cents is 45 cents. So I'm going to take my $9.50, which is half of 19, and add it to the 45 cents, which is half of 90, and that is going to equal $9.95. Same thing over here. If I do 5 plates, that is going to equal half of $9.90. And again, mentally, I can look at 9 and say, I know that half of 9 is 4.5, so $4.50. And if I divide 90 cents in half, or by 2, then that is 45 cents. So half of $9.90 is going to be $4.95. And when I add $9.95 and $4.95 together, I get $14.90. Okay, so now I'm going to add those two numbers together. And when I do, 8 plus 9 is 17. I'm going to bring my decimal point down. There's no hundredths, so I'm going to have 70 cents. And I know that I have to regroup, and so I'm going to put my tick mark up here. And 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 4 is 14. And again, I have to regroup and put a tick mark up here to remind me that I have regrouped my ones into 110, and that is why that tick mark is there. So 1 plus 2 plus 1 is 4. So far I've got 44.70 with 15 people, because these are 15 peeps. Okay. All right, so I'm almost at my $50 limit, but I am not quite there. So let's see if, can I add 2 more people? Can I cut this, divide this by 2 again and see what I come up with? So if I do that, I'm going to look at the prices up here, and I'm going to bring it down just a little bit in 2 utensils sets. If I multiply 199 times 2, I look at this number and it is so close to $2. I'm just 1 cent shy of $2. So if I multiply $2 times 2, that's going to be $4 minus those 2 cents. So 2 utensil sets is going to be $3.98. Those 2 cents that are missing are the 199. There's 1 cent missing there, and there's 1 cent missing from the other $1.99. Okay, same thing with the plates. If I add 2 of them, that is going to equal, again, 99 cents times 2. That's almost $1 each, so that's $2 minus 2 cents. So that's $1.98. And when we add that together, that equals $5.96. Okay, so I'm going to add that to my 44.70. So I bring down the hundredths. That's 6. No carryover, no need to regroup. 7 plus 9 is 16. And I do have to regroup, so I bring one of my 10s up here, or my 10 up here. So 5 plus 5 is 10. I have a bad feeling about this. So I have to regroup my ones into one more 10, and so I am at $50.66. So I went over by 66 cents. Now, in the real world, that would probably be okay. So that would mean that we could have 17 people come to our party. However, that's not what the question is asking. We're asked to really look at this and solve for how many guests can we serve, not fudging the numbers. So in reality, because I have this box here, this tells me the question that I am being asked. Some of our students might be content. Oh gosh, I didn't even realize this was out of frame. I really apologize. Some of our students might be content to look at this and say, The answer is $50.66. Okay, but that doesn't tell us how many people can really be served. So if we're looking at this in terms of this question, how many guests can you serve? The answer is 16 guests, because when we did 10 plus 5 plus 2, we went over by 66 cents. So that must mean we have to do 10 plus 5 plus 1. 10 plus 5 plus 1 equals 16 guests. Okay? Now again, I know that that is a lot of steps, and it's a lot of work. But these are the types of reasoning problems that our students are going to be faced with, and they have to be willing to stick with it and persevere and be precise in their work. Okay? Okay, here is our final relevant word problem that we're going to work on. And I think it's a real world situation. So here we go. You and a friend have just enjoyed a rare meal out at a sit-down restaurant. No fast food tonight. You both forgot to mention the check should be split, and since the restaurant is busy, you don't want to bother your server to print separate checks. You and your friend decide to split the bill evenly, but you disagree on the amount of tip to give. You thought the service deserved a 20% tip, while your friend never tips over 15%. Your friend tells you to pay the bill, and he will reimburse you for his part of the bill up to a 15% tip. If the total bill before tax was $25.89, how much money should you expect to get back from your friend? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Again, I want to put a box around the question that we are being asked, and what we're looking for as far as our solution. And this time it happens to be at the very end of the problem, which is nice. Sometimes, like our first one, they're kind of buried in there before the details. So, okay, so let's look at some of the other information we have. So we know the bill is $25.89, and your friend says, I will only pay up to a 15% tax or a 15% tip on this bill. So that's the other relevant piece of information, because we're not splitting it evenly with a 20% tip. You're going to put a 20% tip on it, but your friend is only going to pay you back up to the 15% tip. So I don't know that I'd ever split checks with him again, but that's another story for another time. Okay, so one of the first things I would do, like we started the last problem with using a guess and check kind of method. And so in this one, I'm looking at the details, and I'm looking at this number, $25.89. And instead of dividing that in half, so we've got 25.89 divided by 2. That's kind of a rough number to work with. So instead of that, I am going to round my bill up to $26. Now, in the grand scheme of things, 11 cents is not going to make a whole lot of difference as far as the tip on that. So we're just going to use that. And then half of that is $13. Okay? So that's what we're going to use. That's the amount we're going to use to figure our tax. And again, I think it's all about using nice numbers. And so I'm going to first start with what would be a 10% tip on $13. And so we know in the last problem that we worked, when we multiplied by 10, we moved our decimal point one place to the right. But this time we're going to be multiplying by 10, but it's a power of 10. We're actually going to, 10% is equal to 0.10 as a decimal. and we're going to multiply it by $13. And that is going to be the amount of tip that we're going to leave, or we're going to include. So if when we multiplied by a whole number of 10, we moved our decimal point to the right, when we're multiplying by a decimal, we're going to end up moving our decimal point one place to the left. So 0.10 times $13, or 113.00, is going to end up being $1.30. So that is our 10% tip. But he wants to leave a 15% tip. So what I'm going to do then is just divide this in half mentally. And so 5% of 13 equals what? And so that is going to be 0.05 of 13, of or times 13 equals what? So but mentally, I can just take half of $1 is 50 cents. So half of that is 50 cents. And then what's half of 30, or 0.30? It's 0.15. So I have 0.5 plus half of 30, which is 0.15, or half of 0.30. So if I add then 0.5 plus 0.15, that is going to give me 65 cents. So I add the 65 to my 1.3, and so 1.30 plus 0.65 is going to equal, bring down the 5, 3 plus 6 is 9, $1.95. Are we done? Okay, let's look back at our question. How much money should you get back from your friend? And what we just figured was the tax, or the tip, I'm sorry. What we just figured here was the tip, but that is not the entire answer. We still have this $13 up here, which is the half of the bill. So half of the bill is 26 because we rounded it up, and that leaves $13 for each of the friends. So I'm going to add my 1.95, which is my tip, to my 13, and I'm going to do this over here. So $13